Kodai Senga and the Mets bullpen were able to pitch a shutout on Friday. Otherwise, the Mets would not have won the game. What is going on with this offense, and when can they call up some reinforcements, whether it be Mark Vientos or Ronnie Mauricio? We're going to discuss all of that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Stop throwing your money away, cancel unwanted subscriptions, and manage your expenses the easy way by going to RocketMoney.com/LockedOnMLB. Now, Friday night, the Mets got a win, okay? So that is amazing. You get off of the schneid after a horrible series in Detroit. You put one up in the win column. Awesome. But any fears or any concerns that we had after getting shut out the other day as a Mets fan? Now you're looking at a game on Friday night where a solo home run by Brandon Nimmo was the only offense the Mets muster. So that doesn't erase any of those concerns. Now, granted, the Mets win the ball game, and that's the most important thing. And credit to Kodai Senga for pitching great, okay? He stranded a couple of walks in the first, couple in the third, gave up 2 hits. Overall, he gets you through 6 innings. The stuff was good. Got, 4 strikeouts, navigated through it, put up 6 zeros is the bottom line. I don't care who he's pitching against. Gave you 6 zeros, gave you length. For a Mets team that hasn't got good starting pitching, what he did for this team was all you could have asked for, right? Go to the bullpen. The bullpen got the job done. Drew Smith, couple strikeouts, strands a hit that he allows. David Robertson didn't look pretty, but he got his way through a couple walks and a hit, got through that top of the Rockies lineup. And Adam Ottavino, man, did that get scary because we all remember what happened in Detroit when he was put in that situation late in the game and was unable to hold things. And boy, did it get dicey, right? Leadoff hit, okay? You have a stolen base, a sac bunt puts a runner on third with just 1 out, and a sac fly could send you into extras, and then who knows what happens. Gets a massive strikeout of Mike Moustakas, and then Charlie Blackmon put a charge in one, honestly. Not that it was in danger of getting out of the ballpark, but he hit the ball fairly hard, okay? 100.6 miles per hour off the bat, but it was lined right to Starling Marte, and the Mets escaped. But even seeing the body language on the Mets after this one, it was relief. But, this is not a team that's suddenly feeling themselves. And you look up and down the lineup, and while, again, the bullpen held, and Senga was good, there was still an 0 for 4 from Starling Marte. Francisco Lindor, 2 strikeouts, 1 for 4 today. Pete Alonso, 0 for 3. And that's the shocking thing. You only got 4 at-bats from the first 3 hitters in this lineup because the team only put up 5 hits and 2 walks collectively. So there's not a lot of guys that had a good day at the office. Brandon Nimmo, one of the only ones, okay? Hits a solo home run in the 4th inning. That is the difference in the game. He made a diving catch in the 5th. He had a double. He was 2 for 3 with a walk. He scored that only run, obviously. Drove in the only run with a solo homer. He was everything to the Mets today. And without him, they don't win this ball game. Outside of him, the only other guy you can look at and say, yeah, offensively, he had a pretty good day is Brett Beatty because he had a double and a walk. He was 1 for 2. Vogelback went 1 for 3. Nito an 0 for. Tommy Pham an 0 for with a strikeout. Jeff McNeil an 0 for. And I already mentioned Pete Alonso. I mean, just not a lot of hits spread out around this lineup. And that continues to be the issue. You applaud them for getting the win. You hope that, Tyler McGill on the mound, they're able to take the second game. And maybe they find a way to have the ugliest sweep ever. And they pull this series out against an awful Rockies team. But you just beat a team that I know they were riding high off of what they did to the Brewers, the 4 wins in a row and everything else. Still a team that went in 8 games under 500 out of their first, 32 games. You're supposed to beat that team. You're supposed to beat that team more convincingly than 1-0. So I'm happy they got the win, but I still look at this lineup and think, what is going wrong here? And what do they do to spark it, to get something going? Because you're not going to win a lot of games 1-0. And to beat the Rockies in a game where you got 6 scoreless from Kodai Senga, you had to use all of your bullets in that bullpen right now. Your best 3 guys. Can you go out against the Rockies and Austin Gomber from the left side and put up 9 runs like you should against a bad Rockies team and save that bullpen for the final game where you might even need to go a bullpen game? I don't know. And that's the question right now. Where can this lineup find a jolt? And is it in AAA in the bat of Mark Vientos? I'm going to discuss that in just a minute. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk things through. BetterHelp will connect you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. Personally, I have been seeing a therapist for a large portion of my life, beginning in school and since I came out of it in my teenage years into my 20s, and it has been such a help to me to always be able to call on someone who's not in my inner circle, not in my family, not my friends, someone who can be unbiased, who I can bounce ideas off, who I can explain what's going on in my head, in my life, and they can just help guide me through that journey to self-discovery. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, you really should give BetterHelp a try, because it's entirely online, which makes it convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. And all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnMLB today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnMLB. So you look at this Mets lineup right now, and I've been going through it the last couple of days, but there's a guy in AAA who's tearing the cover off the ball and has proven everything he needs to. And I'm not talking about Ronnie Mauricio. To me, that is a conversation for another day, and one that in some ways would be easier if he had the resume that Mark Vientos has. And what I mean by that is, you talk about development checkpoints, right? That's a kind of a Billy Epler buzzword right now, or a buzz idea, is that you have to develop a prospect, take them through the minor leagues, and they have to hit certain checkpoints before you know that they're ready for big league play, right? Ryan Mauricio is in his first season in Triple. Ryan Mauricio had a lot to work on with his swing, with his game. They're hoping that the swing decisions they've seen continue, and he's not going to chase as much, and they're trying to iron things out, but he's still not drawing walks in Triple. There's still things that he has to learn, and he needs to play every day. Okay, Ryan Mauricio needs to play every day, and I don't think they are ready to completely put Mark Canha and Tommy Pham, whoever else on ice, and slide Jeff McNeil into left and make Ronnie Mauricio the everyday second baseman. I don't think they're there yet. Mark Vientos, though, as a bat alone, will just focus on the bat, because the glove is what continues to make this impossible for the Mets. He's hit every single checkpoint you could want. 2021, he plays in 72 games in AA, gets 300 at bats, hits 281, 346 on base, 580 slug, 22 home runs in 72 games and 306 plate appearances. A full season in the majors, you're looking at 600 plus plate appearances. So he was a 40 home run type hitter in AA. That's what he showed. Gets the call up to Triple at the end of the season, plays 11 games, and fared well, by the way. Hit 278, got on base at a 395 clip, 583 slug, hit 3 more home runs and less than 50 plate appearances. Well on his way, right? Last year, Plays the entire season except for a cup of coffee in the majors in triple. 101 games, 427 plate appearances, 280 average, 358 on base, 519 slugging. Got off to a slow start too, mind you. Hit 24 homers. Weighted runs created plus is measuring hitters based on a league average of 100. He put up a 129 WRC plus, so he was 29% better than your league average hitter in AAA. Gets the call of the show, doesn't fare well, but really wasn't given a fair shot. Never given consistent playing time. Called on in September. Didn't get time to acclimate. All right, now this year, right back to triple. 27 games played, and I don't believe this is including tonight because these are stats pulled from Fangraphs, and they're usually a day behind on these things, but I think he was 0 for 4, so these stats would take a step back after the game on Friday. But still, leading into that game, he was hitting 354. He was getting on base at a 431 clip, and he was slugging 717. 9 home runs on the season down there. 183 WRC plus, 83% better than your league average hitter. He's got the strikeouts all the way down to 22.4%, which is, I'm looking, the lowest he's had since rookie ball. Walks continuously over 10% throughout his career. Since he went to triple, he's kept that walk rate over 10%. 16.3% in his cup of coffee and triple in 2021 at the end of the season, 11 game sample. 10.3 was his walk percentage in triple last year. And even in the big leagues, despite striking out nearly 30% of the time, he still walked at 12.2% of his at-bats. And now he's got a walk rate of 11.2 to go with that slice strikeout rate down to 22.4 compared to last year where he struck out at a 28% clip, 28.6% clip in AAA. He's giving great at-bats. He's hitting lefties and righties, and he absolutely destroys lefties. He is the best hitter the Mets have against left-handed pitching on the 40-man roster outside of Pete Alonso, in my opinion. That's how good he could be against lefties. You got to find a way to get him in the lineup, but the problem is, where do you put him? That continues to be the issue with Mark Vientos because you can't play him at first, and that's his best position. You finally got Brett Baty acclimated to playing basically every day at third. Are you really going to suddenly force Brett Baty into left to put an inferior fielder at third base where all of a sudden you have Brett Baty, who has not been playing left, forced with learning left again, and Vientos at third base where he's not as good? The only way to get him in the lineup is at DH. And that is the issue. Because, look, they were trying him in left field right now. If he was playing a third of his games or half of his games in left and the rest at third base, fine. But he's splitting time between first and third. So outside of maybe getting Pete off his feet a little bit, playing some first base, and maybe you platoon him and Baty at third, but then where you playing Escobar? There's just no position for Mark Vientos. Yet, I could say that there's no kind of bigger X factor the Mets could call on right now who's ready to take at bats against MLB pitching and to do what this team means, which is drive the ball out of the ballpark, than Mark Vientos. So what do? Do you cut into Daniel Vogelbach's at bats? Do you force Vientos to pick up left field on the fly at the big league level? Do you do the thing where you move Baty? That's the problem. That's what I want to discuss a little more in just a minute. Also, Matt Harvey retired, so I want to touch on that. Before we get to any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by RocketMoney. Try it for free for 30 days. Just enough time to try it. You can always cancel. That's what they tell you, but you know what always happens? You always forget to cancel that subscription, and suddenly you are paying an arm and a leg each month for all of these unwanted subscriptions. In fact, over 80% of people have subscriptions that they forget about. You could be wasting money and not even realizing it. RocketMoney will help you find those forgotten subscriptions so you can stop paying for the ones you don't use. Do you know how much your subscriptions really cost? Most Americans think it's around $80 a month, but in fact, it could actually be upwards of $200. If you don't know exactly how much you're spending every month, you need RocketMoney. It's a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, helps you lower your bills all in one place. Over 3 million people have used RocketMoney, saving the average person up to $720 a year. Stop throwing your money away, cancel unwanted subscriptions, and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/lockedonmlb. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedonmlb. rocketmoney.com/lockedonmlb. So where do the Mets go to get Mark Vientos on the roster before we even get into playing time for him? I mean, you could option Guillorme to the minor leagues because he has not been playing well. Problem, who's your backup shortstop? What's your backup middle infield situation? It's not like Mark Vientos can play second base. Eduardo Escobar, yes, at a pinch could play second, but they like to keep him at third. There's just not a clear option there for them. Do you DFA Eduardo Escobar? Problem there, he's actually starting to take to this limited role. And if the role that Vientos would be grabbing is that you're playing once a week, probably not the best way to acclimate him, to get him comfortable, to get him hitting major league pitching and being an impact bat. It sounds horrible, but it would be amazing for the Mets. Again, I know what I'm about to say is awful, so I'm couching it by putting that out there on the front end. I'm about to say something that is honestly sinful to even try to speak into existence, and that's not necessarily what I'm doing here, but it's just what this team in the weirdest way needs. They need Daniel Vogelbach to pull a hamstring and be out for a couple of weeks. That's what they need. They need to clear him so that you put Mark Vientos into the everyday DH spot and you let him thrive. Because as much as Daniel Vogelbach is succeeding in his role and is one of the better hitters on this team right now, getting on base at a high clip, even hitting the occasional home run, he's not producing what Mark Vientos could. He is not giving the Mets a bat in the middle of the lineup who could go yard when you're playing the Rockies, when there's a runner on first base that could make that 1-0 game a 3-0 game, that could, maybe put you up a run late because he hits that home run. But Vogelbach has done nothing to warrant a DFA. And how many people are trying to trade in May for a left-handed bat that can't hit pitching and can't field a position and doesn't slug too much? It's just, they're between a rock and a hard place here. And the only other option would be, all right, we're going to get rid of Tommy Pham. But then who's your fourth outfielder? Jeff McNeil? Okay. What else are you doing, though? How else are you managing a team day in, day out? Can you really justify a bench of Daniel Vogelbach, Mark Vientos, and Eduardo Escobar? 3 guys who barely have a position. Escobar can play third base. That is the issue. And it kills me that last year, when they were rolling J.D. Davis out there until they traded him for Darren Ruff, that in June last year, the Mets didn't see what they had in Mark Vientos. Because who knows where you could have been had you made that move. But they didn't then. And now Vientos has gotten all the seasoning you want in AAA. That bat is ready to go. But it needs to be in the lineup. And again, it's hard to have Vogelbach and Vientos on the same roster. I don't know what Billy Epler does here. And that's why I said, hey, a hamstring that would get Vogelbach and clear him for 3 weeks and put him on ice. And you see if Vientos can provide that little extra jolt. And then all of a sudden, maybe then you're more comfortable trading a Vogelbach. But that's why Mark Vientos isn't up. Because it is a roster pickle like we've rarely seen before. Where a guy has proven that he is ready to hit. There's every chance that Mark Vientos would be the second best power hitter in this lineup tomorrow. Probably would be. And yet, you're stuck. It's frustrating. And the funny thing about it is that's where Ronnie Mauricio, in a lot of ways, makes more sense for this roster because you could stick him at second, slide Jeff McNeil into left, and you get rid of Pham, and Mark Cannon becomes your fourth outfielder. Team's ready to go. Can Mark Vientos play second base? Unfortunately, no. But hell, maybe you try it. Remember when the Mets did it with Daniel Murphy? They won't, but man, I just don't know what you do. And he would probably kill them at second base. I'm not being serious there. It's just you are in such a weird spot with this team. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe, you know what? This current lineup wakes up from the fog and puts up 12 runs on the Rockies on Saturday, and it becomes a moot point for a while, and Vientos can continue to do what he's doing in triple. But I digress. That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. Unless the game is super crazy and I really want to talk about it, I'll be back on Monday to break down the rest of this series and to preview what lies ahead for all you everydayers. So make sure you follow, rate, and review. Follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan, and follow the show at Locked On Mets. Little segment added on to the back of the podcast here because I mentioned I was going to talk about Matt Harvey retiring, and I got so caught up in the actual conversation of the current team that I forgot to talk about Harvey hanging him up at 34 years old. Just figured it's worth noting on this show because Matt Harvey meant so much to this franchise at one time, the Dark Knight. I still say that greatest pitching performance I ever saw for 8 innings, Game 5 of the World Series. Wish Terry Collins didn't ruin it by sending him back out there. But Matt Harvey showed a lot of grit in many outings. He was so much fun to watch. One of the best Mets for a short period of time. Obviously, there was all the off-field stuff. There was the injuries. There's everything else. And that's why his career ends up coming up short. His baseball karma maybe wasn't on his side the back end of his career. But he brought a lot of feel-good to Mets fans, and he deserved at least some mentioning on this show. I'm sorry I forgot about it, but hey, we squeezed it into the back end. I already mentioned all the good stuff to close out the show. Make sure you check out our next podcast on Monday.